Good morning and welcome to the Baltimore City House Delegation public hearing. My name is Delegate Stephanie Smith, Chair of the Delegation, bringing this meeting to order. At this time, we will review and approve amendments, the minutes from the last meeting. So has everyone had adequate time to review those meeting minutes? And if so, I would love to have a motion to approve if there are no questions.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay? Okay, the meeting minutes are adopted. Now, we are very lucky to have the second of our U.S. senators grace our body. Without further ado, because we do have a tight schedule, I just want to give a hearty Baltimore City welcome to U.S. Senator Ben Cardin. We're so happy that you could join us this morning, and we look forward to hearing the latest and now with the new administration, more of the greatest come from the federal government as it pertains to our great city and region. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, Chairperson Smith, thank you very much for allowing me to come by. I always enjoy meeting with the delegations, but particularly the Baltimore City delegation, because that's my home. That's where I started a few years ago in the Maryland General Assembly. And it's good to see that Delegate Rosenberg is still in the delegation. I think he's the only member who was a part of the General Assembly when I was in the General Assembly, but it's good to be back in the Baltimore City delegation. I do see that Reverend Jerome Stevens is on the phone. He's my eyes and ears in Baltimore, and I thank him for the way that he has represented the Senate so well and connections to local government. So thank you, Jerome Stevens. I see Chris Lynch, who's my chief of staff, is on the call. Mike Thomas, who's my bricks and mortar person, which means money, which might be of some interest to the Baltimore City delegation. We really are Team Maryland. I know Senator Van Hollen has been before you. The two of us work very closely together. We work very closely with the three members of the House delegation from Baltimore City, Kwesi Mfume, John Sarbanes, and Dutch Ruppersberger. So it really is Team Maryland. We want you to know that. And I look forward to being in person during the General Assembly to meet with you. Obviously, that's not possible this year. So January 2021 was an extraordinary month. It started actually on January the 5th, because on January the 5th, Georgia elected 2 Democratic senators, which means that I am now a chair and Senator Van Hollen is now a chair, and that the gavel and leadership is among Democrats, so was Senator Schumer. So, and that makes a big difference in regards to the agenda in the United States Congress. Of course, then the following day, January the 6th, was perhaps the most tragic day in the modern history of America, when the Capitol was sieged by insurrectionists who were encouraged by the President of the United States, Donald Trump. I was on the Senate floor during that time when the insurrectionists were literally within feet of where we were. We were really in harm's way, but our democracy was in harm's way. And the good news is 2 weeks later, at the same location, the peaceful transition of power took place, and Joe Biden became the 46th president of the United States, and Kamala Harris became the first African-American female vice president of the United States. So it was an incredible month. And as a result of those changes, we can wake up every morning without having to wonder what the president of the United States has put out in his tweet the night before. So it's a good feeling. I must tell you, the cabinet that President Biden has put together energizes all of us every day. I can tell you we all are so much more optimistic about what we can do to help the growth of our country. President Biden has laid out a very aggressive agenda: build back better. And this helps Baltimore. Build, we need to modernize our country. You got to invest in infrastructure. In this Congress, I will chair the infrastructure subcommittee of the Environment and Public Works Committee. And we expect to have a very robust infrastructure plan that will be passed this Congress. I met with President Biden along with my counterparts on the Republican side, the chair of the 2 relevant committees and the ranking members. And he made it clear, and we made it clear that we want to work together to pass that package. So that provides opportunities for us in Baltimore as to how we can use the Build Back Better. When we say Build Back Better, we mean fairer. And we had a hearing this past week in the Senate. Governor Hogan testified before our committee. I questioned him as to how we can make the federal partnership more effective in helping Baltimore City. It's one thing to say that we can have public-private partnerships, and we're doing a lot of things in regards to the suburban areas. But when we look at how the transit's been handled from Baltimore versus the Washington areas, we need to stress equity as we go through transportation. And that point was raised at our hearings, and I think you'll see some response by the federal government, perhaps taking away some of the discretion at the state level to make sure that we focus on helping underserved communities. I will also be chairing the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee in this Congress. The COVID relief packages provided significant help for our small businesses. We are now working with the Biden administration on the COVID relief package that is being passed today in the House to target the relief to the underserved communities, which should help Baltimore City. We're talking about helping those businesses that are the smaller businesses that are underbanked, that don't have the same opportunities. And that's been my priority as chair of this committee. I had a chance to meet with the nominee for Attorney General. We hope he will be confirmed, Judge Garland, this coming week, about the consent decree in Baltimore, about making sure that we have a federal partnership to move forward with implementing the provisions of the consent decree, which we think can help deal with the systemic problems we have, but also build a stronger community for all of us. So there's a lot going on. The COVID relief package will come to the Senate this coming week. Here's the good news. If we can get that to the finish line, and I think we will get it to the finish line, it provides an extraordinary amount of relief for Baltimore City. This hasn't been widely reported, and we're not trying to widely report this until we get it to the finish line. CARES Act provided a couple $100 million directly to Baltimore City. That was important. They used it with direct COVID-related expenses. The omnibus bill that passed in December provided money for our schools, provided some additional help for renter assistance, et cetera, but not direct support to Baltimore City. And to date, we have not given our local governments relief in regards to their revenue losses. If we get this bill to the finish line, this $1.9 trillion bill, it's estimated that Baltimore City could receive in direct assistance over $600 million. So this is a big number, and we're working very hard to make this a reality, and this obviously is our top priority. That's in addition to that direct support. There's help for renters, there's help for our schools, there's the direct payments that go to families, there's the extension of unemployment insurance, there's targeted relief for small businesses and restaurants. There's a lot in this bill that can help in dealing with the issue. But perhaps the most important thing is to get this COVID virus behind us, to get it under control. And here we finally have a president who has a plan, who tells the truth to the American people, that leads by example to get COVID under control. And if we want our kids back in school, if we want to be able to have our businesses open in some degree of normalcy, we've got to get this virus under control. And it's got to be done with vaccine distribution in a fair manner. And we are committed to making sure that these funds that are made available under this act help reach all communities so we can keep you safe. And I've introduced legislation, I've worked with my colleagues to deal with public information about getting the COVID vaccine so that we can get into hard underserved communities with the right information and access to the vaccine. So we are working as in a coordinated manner. Yesterday, I had a chance to talk to Dr. Fauci. We talked about ways in which we can reach communities and do a better job. So I am really convinced that we now have the right leadership, the right strategy, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And this COVID relief package will help us get there sooner. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd be more than happy to take a few friendly questions if you have time, or whatever your schedule permits. I'm open this morning.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Very uplifting, big start for our day. I haven't had my coffee yet, but there's a lot of good nuggets in there. Congratulations on your new galleries. I believe Chairman McIntosh had a question.
First of all, thank you, Senator Cardin. This is all wonderful news. And I'm in particular, I'm really interested about what you said about equity in transit and transportation funding. Some of us read the article in the newspaper where Hogan responded about how Baltimore could have a purple line. We got, I couldn't decide whether I should laugh or cry because, in fact, we offered him 6 years ago several alternatives that would have saved $1 billion or so out of the red line. He turned them all down, and his chief of staff told me point blank, he wants to cut the red line so his polling numbers will go up in the suburbs. That's what I was told. And he did it. So this is about absolutely discriminating against Baltimore City. And he did it, came out with a map that didn't have Baltimore on it, as you might recall, had a state map, no Baltimore on the map. And I don't think that was an accident either, by the way. So this is someone who has kept his polling numbers up by treating Baltimore badly. So how is it that you are going to, and will you please follow up with this notion of making sure that you make sure there's not any inequities in transit funding by taking away some of the power? How is it you can do that, or what are you planning on doing?
Well, Maggie, thank you for the question. I strongly oppose Governor Hogan's stopping of the red line. Here's the tragedy. I don't want to go back and over what has already happened. The money, the federal partnership had been approved.
I know.
We lost hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funds that have gone to other communities now. It doesn't go to Maryland. We lost those funds. Hundreds of millions of dollars that was available for the red line. It was an authorized program. It takes years to get a transit program authorized. So even if we were to start today with a viable option for extending the rapid rail system, it would take years to get the federal approval under the current system. The hearing this past week was labeled equities. We recognize that when we build back, we want to build back better. And President Biden's been crystal clear about working with these systemic discriminations that we have in our country, and use every tool we can to deal with equal opportunity. And therefore, yes, I'm looking at ways, and I'll be in the room when this infrastructure bill is crafted, to how we can direct funds to go to deal with inequity. So in transit, I'm not. The transit actually comes under the banking committee, where Senator Van Hollen's on that committee. We're going to look at ways in which we can deal with the transit part of the infrastructure package. But I do have some degree of control as to how those funds are allocated. We also have the transportation alternative programs, which are controlled by local governments. We're going to expand those programs so that they'll be more controlled by local governments on how transportation funds are used. We are trying to get Baltimore City in a different category as far as transit support is concerned. We had a problem in the omnibus bill. So there's a lot of things that are going on. But bottom line is, we are targeting underserved communities. If you look at what President Biden did this week with small businesses on the PPP, the second round, there's now a 14-day exclusive period for the smaller of the small businesses and those that are in underserved communities. So we are opening up opportunities before we do to the general community, to the underserved communities and those communities that have been left behind traditionally. And Baltimore will qualify for that type of assistance.
Good. And I just, last sentence, I just point you to look at the ridership data when we closed down Maryland for those 2 or 3 months, and see where ridership fell by 80 to 90% and where it did not. It did not fall in Baltimore because Baltimoreans are transit dependent. We are the most transit dependent region of the state, and yet we have been completely left out of the Hogan transportation vision. So we need your help, and I thank you again. It's a good day.
Yeah, we totally agree with you on this issue, and I can tell you we're laser focused to help.
Thank you so much. We have time for one additional question from Delegate Rosenberg.
Ben, welcome back. We
Thank
normally meet in the Ways and Means Committee, where you spent the first 12 years of your time in Annapolis. Can you provide any more details on the $600 million that will be coming directly to the city that you mentioned, what that would be for?
So I hate to correct you, Sandy, but the House office building was not built when I first came to the General Assembly. So, but thank you for at least reminding me about those issues. I go back a while, as some of you know. Here's the good news. As constructed by the Biden administration, and as we expect to pass, these are flexible funds. Flexible funds, unlike the CARES Act that had to be directed to COVID-related expenses, that you had to document, get pre-approval before the funds were released, and it took a long time to get the money out. These funds are intended to get out to local governments quickly, and they're much more flexible use. They can make up for the revenue losses that we've experienced as a result of COVID-19. As you all know, a lot of the special taxes that are collected locally have been decimated by COVID-19. You can use these funds to make up for those types of revenue losses. So it is direct funds, doesn't go through the state, goes directly to the city. There's no real strings attached other than to make sure it is spent in a way that will deal with making up for what has happened as a result of COVID-19. So it's much, much more flexible. And this is the quirk that's in the system where for once, Baltimore City benefits because Baltimore City gets help as a large subdivision as well as a municipality. So it's really getting the distribution numbers are the highest of any subdivision in Maryland. And that's good news for Baltimore City.
Thank you so much, Senator Cardin. I wish we had more time, but this is not the only time we get to interface with you. As questions come up, we'll make sure that we stay in close contact with Jerome on your staff, as well as any other member of the team that you've provided their appearance with us here today. So I just want to say a hearty thank you, and just I know it feels good. You have the wind at your back. I know it's not it's not going to be easy, but I'm optimistic about the future of Maryland and our great nation. So just thank you so much for your part in the fight on EPW. We really appreciate it.
And I just tell you, I appreciate what you all do. You're the front lines, you're out there, and I know you're working under extremely difficult circumstances with COVID-19 and the challenges we have in Baltimore. So thank you for your public service, and thank you for representing us so well. Stay well, everybody.
Yeah, same to you. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to proceed with our agenda. I just made a minor switcheroo just based on some of the timing that we're going to have today with some of our obligations on the floor. And I'm just going to switch and do the voting session first because we should just get that out of the way. We've already heard these things. And there's been some additional information that everyone should have received in their emails as it pertains to relevant amendments. But our staff council will give summaries of all bills and relevant amendments before we take a motion to proceed to a vote or not. Okay. So without further ado, staff council, Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 1293, Baltimore City West North Avenue Development Authority, is a bill by Delegate Ampery. House Bill 1293 establishes the West North Avenue Development Authority in Baltimore City to support the development and approval of a comprehensive neighborhood revitalization plan in the target area and the buffer zone. The bill requires the authority to work in coordination with residents of the target area to develop the plan. And finally, it requires the authority to report the revitalization strategy to the governor, the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee, and the House Appropriations Committee by July 1st, 2026. There are no amendments.
Are there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion to take a vote? Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Roll call.
Delegate Amprey.
Yes.
Delegate Anderson.
Aye.
Delegate Attar.
Yes.
Delegate Boyce.
Yes.
Delegate Chanel Branch.
Yes.
Delegate Talmadge Branch.
Aye.
Delegate Bridges.
Yes.
Delegate Klippinger.
Yes.
Delegate Conaway.
Yes.
Delegate Haynes. Delegate Lewis.
Yes.
Delegate Learman.
Yes.
Delegate McIntosh.
Yes.
Delegate Rosenberg.
Yes.
Delegate Wells.
Yes.
Chair Smith.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We'll move to the next bill on the vote list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 1316, Baltimore City Police Officers Promotional Appointments, is a bill by Delegate Smith. There is an amendment, so I'll explain the bill and then I'll explain the amendment. House Bill 1316 alters the procedures used by the Police Commissioner of Baltimore City to award promotional appointments by requiring the Commissioner to make an appointment from applicants who place in the top 20 positions on an eligible list. The bill also authorizes the Commissioner to remove certain applicants from the list of eligible appointees if, during the time of the application process for the promotion, the Civilian Review Board has sustained a misconduct complaint against the applicant for which the punishment could be termination if found guilty. The amendment basically replaces that top 20 with a top 25%, provides that the calculation is rounded down to the nearest whole number, is calculated on the issuance of the new promotional list, and remains fixed for the life of that list. And in addition, it is not, as amended, the Civilian Review Board or the department's Disciplinary Review Committee can be the one to sustain the misconduct complaint for which termination is a possibility that can remove an applicant from the list.
Are there any questions about the amendment? Is there a motion to adopt the amendment?
The amendments, Madam Chair.
Second.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Is there a motion to vote on the bill as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Roll call.
Delegate Amprey.
Yes.
Delegate Anderson.
Aye.
Delegate Attar.
Yes.
Delegate Boyce.
Yes.
Delegate Chanel Branch.
Aye.
Talmadge Branch.
Aye.
Delegate Bridges.
Yes.
Delegate Klippinger.
Respectfully request to be marked as excused, as I'm the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and that's where this bill is coming next.
Delegate Conaway.
Yes.
Delegate Haynes. Delegate Lewis.
Yes.
Delegate Learman.
Yes.
Delegate McIntosh.
Yes.
Delegate Rosenberg. Delegate Rosenberg.
Yes. Yes.
Delegate Wells.
Yes.
Chair Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll go to the next bill. I think that's 1217.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 1217, Baltimore City Tax Sales Owner Occupied Residential Property, is a bill from Delegate Conaway. House Bill 1217 prohibits the tax collector in Baltimore City from selling owner-occupied residential property for unpaid taxes that are less than $2,500. There are no amendments.
Sorry, I had a little delay getting off of mute. Thank you. I just wanted to remind folks, you may have received, you should have received an email last night noting that the city did register some feedback based on some of the questions that were provided during the hearing. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention that for House Bill 1217, the city is in opposition. So I know that at the time they did not have a formal letter, but they were listening to some of the feedback and questions from the hearing and wanted to make sure you had that available for your full consideration. At this time, are there any additional questions or feedback? Is there a motion to vote on this bill? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 1219, Baltimore City Tax Sales Notice, is another bill from Delegate Conaway. House Bill 1219 requires a tax collector at least 30 days before any property is first advertised for a tax sale to send a statement by first-class certified mail that includes the amount of taxes due to the person who last appears as owner of the property on the collector's tax roll. There are no amendments.
Thank you. Is there are there any questions or feedback or discussion needed? Is there a motion to take a vote?
I'd like to make a motion to take a vote.
Is there a second? I apologize. Did I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Roll call.
Delegate Amprey.
No.
Delegate Anderson.
Aye.
Delegate Attar.
Yes.
Delegate Boyce.
No.
Delegate Chanel Branch.
Yes.
Delegate Talmadge Branch.
Aye.
Delegate Bridges.
Yes.
Delegate Clippinger.
Yes.
Delegate Conaway.
Yes.
Delegate Haynes.
Yes.
Delegate Lewis.
Yes.
Delegate Learman.
Yes.
Delegate McIntosh.
Yes.
Delegate Rosenberg.
Yes.
Delegate Wells.
Yes.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. We'll be moving on to the next bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 21, Baltimore City Tax Sales, Water and Sewer Liens. It's another bill from Delegate Conaway. House Bill 1221 prohibits the amount of any lien for unpaid charges for water and sewer service from being considered in determining the amount of total taxes on a property for a tax sale in Baltimore City of owner-occupied residential property. There are no amendments.
Thank you. I also want to bring to the body's attention that the city is also in opposition to House Bill 1221. Is there any additional discussion or feedback?
May I offer a little discussion?
Absolutely.
It seems as though we had two conflicting amounts. One amount's $150, I believe, and the other issue was it's supposed to be that the water bill is not supposed to be included in the tax sale. So it seems that the 350 was a threshold. The average tax was around about 1,500. So with a year behind in the COVID, most people will come up for the tax sale. So I would ask for consideration on that.
I appreciate that feedback. Is there any additional discussion or feedback before we take a motion on whether to vote? Yes, Council.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify the $350 other subsection that applies to water and sewer liens does not apply to residential properties.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there a motion to take a vote?
I will make a motion to vote.
Is there a second? Hearing none, we will now be voting on House Bill 1221. And I believe we have one last bill, House Bill 1222.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 1222, Baltimore City tax sales notice requirements, also from Delegate Conaway. House Bill 1222 requires a notice of tax sale in Baltimore City to include an itemized list of the source and amount of each tax due that the collector seeks to recover through a tax sale. There are no amendments.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Just a reminder, there was no opposition to this bill either at the hearing. Is there a motion to take a vote on this bill?
I'd like to make a motion to vote the bill.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? Roll call.
Delegate Amprey.
Yes.
Delegate Anderson.
Yes.
Delegate Attar.
Yes.
Delegate Boyce.
Yes.
Delegate Chanel Branch.
Yes.
Delegate Talmadge Branch.
Aye.
Delegate Bridges.
Yes.
Delegate Klippinger.
Yes.
Delegate Conaway.
Yes.
Delegate Haynes.
Yes.
Delegate Lewis.
Yes.
Delegate Learman.
Yes.
Delegate McIntyre.
Yes.
Delegate Rosen.
Yes.
Delegate Wells.
Yes.
Chair Smith.
Yes.
The motion carries.
So that concludes our voting session. So thank you for being so flexible. I wanted to preserve as much time for the remainder of the meeting for our bill hearing so that we have suitable opportunity to move forth with each bill. So without further delay, we're going to jump right in to House Bill 1320 with Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I believe I submitted testimony. I did submit it late last night, and so I don't want to read it verbatim. So I'm going to summarize it because I know there are other people here to discuss on it. So, Madam Chair, members of the Baltimore City Delegation, for the record, I'm Regina T. Boyce, delegate of the 43rd District, presenting HB 1320, Baltimore City Property Taxes Authority to set special rates. The bill allows Baltimore City and authorizes them to set special property tax rate for any class or subclass of real property, of course, subject to the city's property tax beginning the 30th of this year, June. So the purpose is just to provide the city with the ability to diversify how it taxes different classifications of real property. At its own admissions, the Department of Finance stated that, they're always looking for ways to diversify its property tax base, especially if the goal is to reduce real property tax and, most importantly, remove the obstacle of the tax, which is why sometimes people don't decide to move to the city. So this bill would enable, of course, the city to begin exploring that option to hopefully reduce property tax. Of course, this is a model in Washington, D.C., my birth city, where property taxes are based on classifications. And when we say classifications, we mean, for instance, we can tax residential property differently than we do commercial or industrial or open space or blighted or vacant properties. And so in DC, they have 4 of these classifications, and they have within their second classification 3 sub-classifications. So if I can just give you an example, their first classification, of course, is residential and multi-purpose, which is at a certain tax rate of 85 cents per every $100. Their second tier classifications have 3 subsections for commercial and industrial properties that are based on the amount of the property value. So there are different set prices for if it's 5 million, if it's between 5 million and 10 million, then of course a set rate if the property is 10 million or more. And of course they have a vacant property provision as their third class, and then their fourth class is blighted. So, I just want to point out that, of course, Baltimore City has the highest property tax in the state, 2.264%, but we also have the highest poverty rate at 21.8%. And when we look at the state as a whole, but when we look at places like Washington, D.C., and most importantly, Montgomery County here, in the state, they have lower and some of the lowest in the region property taxes, and they also have a bit of a lower poverty rate. And so, I know you guys saw the article with Live Baltimore last year. The city sold more houses last year during a global pandemic than they did the year before, but the most houses in a year in more than the last 10 years. And so I think the city needs any successful tool that will attract new residents and businesses. And this is, I think, a tool that would allow them to do it and allow some of our residents not to have such a high tax burden. And if this is a tool that can help the city, I'm certainly happy to offer this bill in order to do so. And with that, I want to thank the city delegation for their time and consideration and support of HB 1320. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Is there any additional testimony in support of House Bill 1320?
Madam Chair, I'm here to testify.
Okay, thank you.
I can proceed, Madam Chair.
By all
Good morning, former colleagues. Absolutely miss my MGA family and friends, and thank you for all the hard work you do to uplift and support the city of Baltimore. I'm Nick Bosby, President of the Baltimore City Council. For the record, here to testify on HB 1320, Baltimore City Property Taxes Authority to Set Special Taxes. I would like to call out the amazing and strong fighting supporter, Delegate Boyce, for bringing this timely bill along. As she discussed, this is an enabling piece of legislation that will provide the city of Baltimore another tool in its arsenal to bring back our communities. We understand and know the impacts of redlining. We understand and know the impacts of segregation. We understand and know some of the bigger policy that was passed through the Baltimore City Council that is really reflective on our communities that we see today. The one thing that I like to constantly talk about is when we see and look at generational wealth, typically in America for a middle-class family, it would be through property, owning property, sustaining property. Imagine purchasing property 30 years ago and that property being basically worth the same it was then today. Even though you had to continuously put money into it to maintain and sustain that property, unfortunately, you are not able to participate in the generational wealth that property was supposed to kind of provide back to your family or to your loved ones, similar to properties in other communities. Well, this bill somewhat tries to counteract that. It provides a special tax enabling ability for the city to ensure that the communities that are strangled with vacant properties, with abandoned properties, that those property owners are kind of held to the same level of accountability as the ones who were there fighting. When I purchased my house in Reservoir Hill, I lived between two vacant homes. I lived next to a woman who lived between two vacant homes. One of those vacant homes was my house. And unfortunately, paying the same tax rate for a property that's worth $22,000 versus someone who's living in their property, who's keeping up the roof, who's keeping their house warm, who's paying the same exact tax rate, but much more money a year is problematic. So that's what this causes. When we see our communities, when we talk about public safety, when we talk about DPW, these vacant properties are a nuisance to the citizens of Baltimore, and it's critically important that we develop ways and tools for the mayor and city council to kind of counteract that. I look forward to working with my partners in government. This is a bill that the mayor supports. This is a bill that the council supports. And I'm here just to say thank you to Delegate Boyce for bringing this timely legislation forward. We understand and know the economic impact of COVID and the residual effects this will have on our city and our city's budget. And this just provides, again, another tool in our arsenal to fight back and counteract it. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the city delegation for listening to my testimony. Again, I ask that you vote on this favorably.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you for your return virtually to the body. Are there any additional testimony in support of House Bill 1320? Is there?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm here on
Yes.
behalf of the Mayor's office.
Oh, yes. No, sorry, I didn't see you. There you go. Sorry. By all means.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Natasha May here on behalf of the Mayor of Baltimore City in support of House Bill 1320. I do want to thank Delegate Boyce for putting this bill forward and for working with our administration to provide these tools in the toolbox in order for us to better address our property taxes. I think the previous panelists, Council President Mosby and Delegate Boyce, did a wonderful job of explaining the many beneficial ways this could help our city. Delegate Boyce spent considerable amount of time working with our finance department, consulting with us to address our needs and to help tailor them to what would be beneficial. As she has explained, the legislation would provide us with more flexibility to establish those different property tax rates. And it would allow us to explore ways to better set them in order to help our current residents, to help attract more residents and businesses to Baltimore City. It is enabling legislation, and by setting a general framework, it allows us on the city level to determine the specifics of how such tax rates can be applied if we choose to. And it's important to ensure that balance so that we can put forward a beneficial classification that would do the best for our city residents, businesses, and other entities. And so with that, I would urge a favorable report on House Bill 1320. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there any additional supportive testimony for House Bill 1320? Is there any testimony in opposition to House Bill 1320? Hearing none, that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 1320. Thank you to all the participants.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say there was one written testimony from, I believe, Councilwoman Odette Ramos. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Okay, we'll be hearing another bill from Delegate Boyce, House Bill 1070.
Ooh, I feel like it's the boy show. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. And as well as I have submitted my testimony, I just want to respectfully summarize because I know we're running out of time or we are on a tight schedule. But for the record, I'm Regina T. Boyce, delegate of the 43rd District, presenting HB 1070, Baltimore City Landlord and Tenant Repossession for failure to pay rent. HB 1070 essentially creates new procedures and for repossessing property by requiring a notice of rent due to the tenant on the due date, defining the types of delivery of the notice, stipulating what the notice must contain, and prohibiting a landlord from filing a written complaint in district court until 14 days after the notice for rent is delivered. The landlord may, on the 15th day, file a written complaint in district court. And so I just want to basically start summarizing as I went through this and thought about this. You know, the question is does the landlord have the right to sue a tenant for rent without notice of what is due? And some people would say yes. The yellow piece of paper stuck on the door is a notice, and I respectfully say no, it's not. It is your papers to be sued to pay your rent. And so I always question, is this right? Is this fair? Is this just? And my answer personally and professionally is no. I don't believe the landlord has a right to sue a tenant for rent due without notice of what is due. And when I think about our other financial obligations in our life, whether it's a mortgage, whether it's our utility bills, whether it's our insurance, I mean, whether it's, hey, you know, your Netflix account, you get a notice about your bill. And when, and you get it by, you know, mail, you get it by text, you get it by, you know, sometimes now email, a due date, you get a period of time before penalties are assessed, and then you also get a notice about the consequences or action that will be taken if the financial obligation has not been satisfied in your contracted reasonable time. So generally, no one is sued the day after a contracted obligation is due, and most importantly, without notice. And from any of these financial obligations that I've mentioned, yet has happened to any of us, and yet this is what we do for rent. We sue people without notice. And so, as you know, our district court has about 650,000 filings per year. And from those filings, we know about only 20 to 22,000 of them where actual evictions occur. And that's 20%. And we know most of those cases end up being dismissed, or most importantly, if the tenant cannot pay the rent, they usually vacate the property. And if the data is telling us that most renters are paying the rent before, especially their court date or on their court date, I think we need to change our policies, our procedures, and our processes to match those behaviors and provisions needed to give tenants more time to pay rent. I just want to finally conclude in saying that the goal of this bill is to just try to, one, cut down the court filings for evictions, which will remove the inundation of unnecessary filings and provide the grace period tenants need to pay their rent every month without the trauma of being sued monthly. Less inundation will allow the system to be able to highlight tenants who are coming through the courts that critically need resources that rent advocates can provide, so that we can begin to tackle causes of housing instability, housing affordability, and most importantly, homelessness. And so I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the Baltimore City Delegation for your time and your consideration of support for HB 1070. I do want to throw in that I have been vigorously meeting with, I've met with Judge Morrissey, as well as some of the opponents of the bill, and we're working really well. So I've already submitted amendments to this bill that take out certain provisions and add different ones. For instance, allowing a landlord to be able to text and or email a rent notice, because some people do pay their rent online or through an automatic deduction. So I wanted to click that out. And I also changed, per Judge Morrissey's request, that the judge would have the authority to dismiss a case if the landlord hasn't met requirements, versus saying that the clerk has to do it, because the clerk has the legal obligation to take all filings. So I wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much, members.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to let folks know that if you do have questions, to please use the correct button for raising your hand. And also, Delegate Conaway, you have a majestic sun coming through your blinds that makes it a bit impossible for me to see much of your hand motions or anything you're doing. So please use the chat if you do need me for anything. I apologize because I couldn't really make out any of the movements, but it does look beautifully sunny where you're sitting. So are there any questions for Delegate Boyce? Okay, hearing none, I believe we do have some supportive testimony from Dan Sparaco.
Good morning, delegation. Thanks for having me and hearing this bill. I think this bill, HB 1070, in tandem with Attorney General Farash's bill, introduced by the Speaker, HB 729. These two bills in tandem will drastically change the culture of the courthouse, probably cut total filings at least in half, and make it possible to implement other proposals, be it right to counsel, tenant diversion, ADR run by the courthouse. To me, this is a precondition and incredibly important bill in my view. And I got to tell you, the two things stunned me when I moved here. I used to represent tenants in New York at the Legal Aid Society. In New York, when I worked, they had tenants got a 5-day notice before getting sued, and within that period of time, they can resolve the dispute with their landlord and pay or figure it out. That notice period is now 14 days, because my old boss at the Legal Aid Society now works for the mayor, and they changed the rule, and there's a right to counsel in New York City. We really, and I beg you, the delegation, to really ask yourselves, who do we think we are as a state? who do we imagine ourselves to be? I bet most of you are like, yeah, we're like New York or Massachusetts. We're a modern, democratic, fair state with resources to help our poorer friends. We are almost alone in not having any notice at all. I mean, that stunned me. When I moved here almost over a decade ago, two things stunned me. One, I could not take a train on the weekend from here to DC. Absolutely blew my mind. I grew up on Long Island. I could take a train to New York City anytime I wanted. The other thing that blew my mind is that you could sue a tenant at any time with no notice. The states that allow that, I really want you to think about who are those other states and what are they like? West Virginia, Louisiana, high poverty states where tenants probably don't have much of a voice. Where else? Missouri. You know, we just had Senator Cardin on with us. Do you know who your senator is? If you're a poor Black person who's at risk of eviction or has other needs in St. Louis or Kansas City, you know who your senator is? It's the guy who led the insurrection. It's Josh Hawley. You have states and New Jersey. You know, New Jersey is right on a lot of things, but New Jersey is another state that is full of majority Black cities, and New Jersey is another state that doesn't require any notice at all. It offends my sense of fairness, and as a bureaucratic and structural matter, it clogs the courthouse. You know, so I think this is extremely important. I refer my written testimony. I know there are other bills there. I reached out to Delegate Attar and Delegate Wells because I haven't had a chance to, and I feel badly talking about your bills without speaking to you first. I think Delegate Attar's bill makes a lot of sense. I think it's important.
Can we stay focused on this bill? I'm so sorry, time is short.
Oh, yes, yes.
You can keep your focus to this. Thank you.
Sure. I worry that I don't know what's happening in the background, but I know there's a lot of rent bills. You know, I think it's good to have. I think some of them work together. I think the big question I have is Delegate Wells's bill is doing a lot more. So there is a notice requirement in that bill, but it seems dependent on the other things going on in that bill, and it's up to you all to, you know, it's very important as a matter of sequencing that notice built into black letter law in Maryland. And I also think that Attorney General France's bill working together, and it's up to you all to figure out how the rest of those other programs would work. Are they going to pass this session? I just hope this particular issue doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Because as I said, imagine, I'll just close with this. You know, we have landlords in this city who issue eviction lawsuits to their tenants every month. And again, like, what kind of world are we living in? Imagine you're that person every month. Oh, my landlord's trying to evict me again. Like, can you imagine living like that? That's normal here for lots of people. And I'm amazed that it's normal. And it's been normal for many, many decades. And that this bill immediately does immensely important things just by making procedural changes and creating simple hurdles that every modern state in America already has in place. So
thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it. I believe that our city solicitor, Jim Shea, is also signed up to provide testimony on this bill.
I don't think I'm signed up for this bill, Madam Chair. I'm here for the local control.
Oh, okay. I apologize for that.
No problem.
Are there any additional witnesses to provide support for House Bill 1070? Are there any questions for the past witness?
I'm sorry, there is Catherine Howard. She has her hand raised.
Oh, I apologize. I see you, Ms. Howard, by all means.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate the chance to add Maryland Multi-Housing Association's favorable with amendments testimony today for this bill. The Public Local Law of Baltimore City, particularly the two sections that Delegate Boyce has focused on in this bill, really have been in need of change for a long time. I think that the discussions that we've had with Delegate Boyce and the amendments that we have written amendments, unfortunately, I was too late to get them into the delegation this morning, but I know Delegate Boyce has them, and I will make sure that we get them distributed to all of you. But we definitely agree with the concept of making sure that there is a pre-filing default notice, that that it is able to be sent by a variety of means that will reflect today's technology, the tenant portals and email and text messaging and things along those lines. And also make sure that there is a definite and clear way of making sure that that becomes a matter that the court takes into consideration when they are going to try one of these failure to pay rent cases. With that, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm very happy to work with the delegation and continue working with Delegate Boyce to make this bill one of the vehicles that we are working on along with all of the other matters that have to do with landlord-tenant law in this state. And I look forward to working with everybody here.
Thank you so much, Ms. Howard, for your testimony. Are there any questions for Ms. Howard or Mr. Sparaca? Hearing none, is there any testimony in opposition to this bill? Okay, seeing no opposition, that concludes this bill hearing and the conclusion of the Boyce Show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
At this point, we will move on to Delegate Wells, House Bill 1027.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Wells Show now. No, I'm very pleased. For the record, I'm Delegate Melissa Wells, here to present on House Bill 1027 on behalf of Mayor Baltimore City. I introduced this bill, which would help establish local control for Baltimore Police Department from the state to the city. This is an issue that has come before the delegation in previous years, and we have successfully passed this out of delegation. I want to add, because we have a strong panel coming, and I want to give them a chance to provide more insight on what will happen and how we will get there. But really, this legislation is about helping the city as we continue to make strides under the consent decree, helping our city be able to do more in terms of implementing innovative community-based changes through the local elected body. So with that, I urge a favorable report, and I will hand it over to my panel. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's great for us to just begin with our city solicitor, I believe, and then we'll just continue with all supportive testimony and then take questions at the conclusion of that testimony, okay, in the interest of time. So City Solicitor Jim Shea, now is the appropriate time for me to call upon you.
I'm going to dodge one more time, though, and have Ms. Mayhew start us off, if that's all right.
I enjoy the delicate dance. It's fine. Natasha, please.
All right, good morning again. Natasha Mayhew here on behalf of the Mayor of Baltimore in support of House Bill 1027. This bill is a top priority of our administration. Local control of the Baltimore Police Department is about racial justice, it's about police accountability, and it's about representative democracy. As Baltimore City is the only jurisdiction in the state that does not directly oversee its police department, this bill would put us in the same posture as comparable jurisdictions around Maryland. The ability to set policies and provide oversight locally will enable us to truly transform the BPD and fulfill our consent decree requirements. Paired with statewide police reform efforts being considered by this body, local control will go a long way to that meaningful transformation. I know this is a topic that is familiar to all of you and one that has passed out of the House before. So I do want to highlight some changes from prior years that have been introduced to address concerns that have blocked its passage in the past. So to address concerns over the process of local control, this bill will establish an advisory council of key stakeholders to guide and oversee the transition. To address liability concerns, the bill clearly states that BPD will be considered an agency and instrumentality of the state for all actions, omissions, and events that occur prior to the date of transfer. And then will be considered an agency and instrumentality of the city for those same considerations thereafter. To ensure residents have a voice in the matter, the transfer of control is contingent on the passage of an amendment to the Charter of Baltimore City and its ratification by the voters of Baltimore City. The steps provided in this bill afford the state, BPD, the city government, city delegation members, and all necessary stakeholders the time and process for guaranteeing that the transfer of control occurs with foresight and precision. We have worked with our stakeholders to further strengthen the bill. So there are additional amendments coming. We recognize that implementing local control as soon as humanly possible and ensuring additional community input is necessary. So we will be adding additional representation onto the advisory council. This would include the city solicitor, a representative from the Civilian Review Board, 3 members of the community, 1 representative from the FOP, 1 representative from the Vanguard Society, a representative from the consent decree monitoring team, and a representative from the community oversight task force. In regards to the timeline for enactment, we will have an amendment that would clarify that if the amendment to the charter of Baltimore City that provides for local control is ratified at the 2022 general election, the transfer will take effect in 2023. And if the amendment to the charter that provides for transfer is ratified at the 2024 general election, the transfer will take effect in January 1st, 2025. So I want to stress to everyone that this is truly a process that considers the community, it considers the BPD and all partners to participate in the specifics of what local control will entail. We have been careful to ensure that the advisory board will be tasked with analyzing, considering, and advising on any additional changes necessary to see the process through, rather than a piecemeal approach which picks and chooses future changes. This has been 10 years in the making, and we are happy to see this through this session. So with that, I would urge a favorable report on House Bill 1027. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that testimony. Next supportive testimony, I won't say names, but you know who they are.
I think I'm next, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the delegation, I'm Jim Shea, City Solicitor, and I'm here to provide some testimony in support of House Bill 1027. I will address the legal ramifications of a transfer of the Baltimore Police Department from a state agency to a city agency. It is my opinion that such a transfer would have little or no effect on the liability burden that Baltimore City would carry with respect to suits against police officers and the police department. I could go into inordinate length on this, but I don't want all of you to fall asleep as I do that. So let me just summarize quickly the salient points. First, Baltimore City already pays in full judgments against police officers through its duties of indemnification, which are imposed on it by both state law and the collective bargaining agreement with the police department or the police FOP. So the change will not affect that obligation to pay the suits against the individual police officers. The second reason that there will be no change is that heretofore there had been a notion that in federal constitutional litigation, that as a state agency, the police department would have some immunity under the 11th Amendment. That has proved elusive, if not illusory, because the federal courts in Maryland have not granted the Baltimore Police Department a status as an arm of the state, notwithstanding its nominal position as a state agency. Instead, the federal courts have applied a functional test, asking whether the agency affects the state budget, whether the agency is in effect run by the state, and those functional answers have always been no, and therefore, to this point, uniformly, the courts have denied that 11th Amendment immunity. Therefore, changing from a state agency to a city agency will have no effect on that issue. So those are the two basic fundamental reasons, both of which mean there'll be little or no change in liability burden. And with that, I urge the favorable report on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor, Mr. Shea, for that. Is there any additional supportive testimony? Yes, Ms.
Greetings, Madam Chair and members of the delegation. My name is Kalen Young, the Director of Public Policy at the ACLU of Maryland, here in strong support with amendments of House Bill 1027 to finally set a pathway to restore local control of the Baltimore Police Department to our residents in Baltimore. This is one of the 5 reforms that we are pushing for as part of the Maryland Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability. This is also a primary goal of the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs. Thank you to Delegate Wells for introducing the bill, and to my former boss and Mayor Brandon Scott for not hesitating to fulfill a campaign promise. I want to also thank Delegate Anderson for his previous introduction of 2017's bill, House Bill 1504, and to Delegate Talmadge Branch for House Bill 278 in 2019, which previously passed this delegation and the House unanimously. As you know, the BPD has been a state agency since the Civil War. Additionally, until recently, the state legislature has provided minimal oversight to the BPD. And this has contributed to what BPD Monitor Ken Thompson referred to as a culture of corruption. Recall he made this statement during a consent decree briefing before the Judiciary Committee in 2019. In the same briefing, then new Commissioner Mike Harrison said, and I'm paraphrasing, a corrupt police force cannot reduce crime. You must eliminate the corruption first before you can see sustained crime reduction. And we know that our police department has been making improvements and moving in the right direction under the consent decree. But remember that the Community Oversight Task Force said that local control was needed for full implementation of that consent decree. Local control allows the City Council to provide the necessary oversight that it has been via the monthly crime stat meetings and its monthly budget oversight meetings, but now they'll have the teeth to hold the department accountable. Local control is about racial justice, police accountability, representative democracy, and self-determination for the people of Baltimore. Implementing local control and ensuring a robust community participation is essential for building bridges of trust between our police department, Baltimore's Black communities, and our residents as a whole. We are grateful as a coalition to have been able to work very closely with Natasha and the mayor's administration on a set of amendments to expand the advisory board to include more community members, require that that board complete its final report on May 1st, 2022, and to move the charter ballot question to the 2022 election as opposed to the 2024 election, understanding now that we're leaving it a little bit open for unforeseen situations like the pandemic. And we hope that therefore we'll be able to move local control, transfer control to 2023. So with that, I thank you for your time, and we urge a favorable report.
Thank you so much. And I do want to mention, just as a point of clarification, that in the House delegation, if there are any amendments, they need to be transmitted to us via our staff counsel, Jeremy Baker, or that could be sent through the Baltimore City delegation email, but all amendments to delegation bills, he prepares them for us. So I just want to make sure people know that it's kind of how the staffing side works. Are there any additional witnesses to provide supportive testimony? Are there any questions for these sets of witnesses? Seeing none, is there any testimony in opposition? Mr. Cherry.
Yeah, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the city delegation. Thank you first for having me. For those of the delegates that don't know who I am, my name is Robert Cherry. I am a 30-year resident and voter in the 40th District, Baltimore City. I am a 28-year sworn member of the Baltimore City Police Department, currently serving as a sergeant in the homicide unit. I'm back at my second tour of working murders in the town. And I was the former president of the FOP from 2008 to 2014. Just real quickly, Madam Chair, I believe you and the delegation have in front of you my written testimony. And there are kind of really big, 4 big bullet points in there. So I don't want to belabor that point, but I do want to just clarify a couple things that Ms. Mayhew and the city solicitor said, and then go into what I believe is the core piece of this legislation and why the FOP is at least opposed to it as it's written. First, I want to thank Ms. Mayhew and the mayor for introducing the amendment that would include the FOP rep and a rep from the Vanguard. Prior to today, that was not on there, so thank you, Ms. Mayhew. In reference to that, one of the things that actually isn't being discussed here is the mayor, for all practical purposes, does have full control. The mayor hires and fires the police commissioner. The police commissioner in turn hires and fires every sworn and civilian member of the BPD. The police commissioner sets all the rules, regulations of the BPD to include internal affairs and setting up the trial board process. Speaking of the trial board process, one of the things that we're proud of is that through our collective bargaining agreement, the Baltimore City FOP was the first union in the entire state of Maryland to put 2 civilians on the review board. I'm sorry, on the trial board. No other FOP in the state had done that. And we did it through collective bargaining because it keeps the cops at the table and it keeps the administration at the table. This bill, as it is written, would eliminate subtitle 16 and take away all of that language, actually not going back to 1860, members of the delegation, but 1966. Everyone talks about this bill being around since the Civil War. That was when the charter was first put together, but the bill was significantly changed in 1966. We would lose our collective bargaining. Every lieutenant, sergeant, and police officer in the BPD would lose their collective bargaining if this bill is passed the way it is written. And I've reached out to Mayor Scott and Ms. Mayhew and asked them to put that amendment in. We will support local control. If this bill is about local control, then why do you want to deny only police with a collective bargaining agreement that we've had since 1984? In reference, and I don't want to be too much on time, as I know you're busy, Madam Chair, you have a lot on your agenda, but to the city solicitor's statement about immunity, again, we lose our collective bargaining with the FOP, as the city solicitor stated. Well, then there goes the immunity for the police officers that's written in the collective bargaining. The second thing is your own Department of Legislative Affairs did say that there will be significant unfunded liability for us taxpayers in Baltimore if the BPD loses their sovereign immunity and we're open to direct tort claims in both federal and state court. That's a fact. None of us can predict what would happen down the road when it comes to unfunded liability. So I'll close with this. The FOP is willing to support reform. We're willing to support Commissioner Harrison. Our job is to keep you and every one of us safe. I do that in my offices in homicide and across the city do that every single day. Just let us keep our collective bargaining that is written in subsection 16-8A in this bill. And please encourage the mayor to introduce those amendments and in turn get what he really wants, which is full local control. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cherry, for your testimony. I believe Delegate McIntosh has a question.
Yes, I do. Cherry, I mean, your testimony is interesting. I didn't realize that this affected collective bargaining, which can you describe how the collective bargaining between the city and the FOP since you've had it since I think 96?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. We've actually, so the Baltimore City FOP has had a collective bargaining agreement with the city of Baltimore going back to 1984. In reference to your direct question, Madam Chair, about how it has gone, I will say this. When I was president, myself, Vice President Ryan, were able to actually incorporate binding arbitration within collective bargaining for direct compensation. Since that date, and this delegation supported us, and it was signed then by Governor O'Malley, that arbitration has never been used. And I think one of the things that we told the delegation and the senators back then, it wasn't used precisely because collective bargaining encourages the rank and file to work with the city. Like I was saying earlier, Madam Chair and members of the delegation, it's because of our agreement with the city that the current FOP under President Mike Mancuso and his team were able to negotiate with the BPD, placing 2 civilians on the trial board, long ahead of the situation in Minneapolis last year and the calls for reform to LOBR this year that's happening now in the House and the Senate. We did that through collective bargaining. Body-worn cameras. We were the first police department in the state of Maryland to put body-worn cameras on every one of our offices. And we did it because we have a collective bargaining agreement. We negotiate in good faith with the mayor, the city council, and the BPD. And I think those are things, Madam Chair McIntosh, Madam Chair Smith, and members of the delegation, that is important in this conversation. And again, I just want to stress that, at a time right now when violent crime is so high, why send a signal to the lieutenants, sergeants, and police officers who already feel under the gun, who already are facing a lot of criticism, as we just heard from one of the proponents who refers to corruption? I've been a cop 28 years. And I'm proud that I can still take the stand, and no judge, defense attorney, or state's attorney has challenged my veracity. And I'm proud of the fact of what we do every day to keep all of you and your constituents safe. All we're asking right now is, Mayor Scott, take control of the BPD back, but let us keep our collective bargaining. That's all we're asking. Thank you, Madam Chair
Thank you.
McIntosh and Madam Chair Smith.
Are there any additional questions? Seeing
Madam
none.
Chair.
Yes, yes, Delegate.
Sorry. May someone from the mayor's office respond?
Oh, sure, by all means.
Thank you. I'll respond to that. So as Mr. Cherry mentioned, Title 16 is about 50 pages long with a number of different local law provisions, including collective bargaining. We designed this bill in order to ensure that we would be thoughtful in any changes to the local laws. So the way the bill is drafted, it does not make any predetermined changes to collective bargaining or any other part of the local laws under Title 16. The intent of the bill is to have the advisory board take a holistic look at how local control would need to be structured, what, if any, changes need to be made under those local laws moving forward. And they would then propose those changes and we would move forward with that. We are not specifically targeting any portion of those local laws. I just do want to clarify that, as Mr. Cherry specifically raised that this bill would remove collective bargaining, and that is not the intent of the bill. The intent of the bill is for all those pieces of local law to be considered and work through this process. Thank you.
Thank you for both points made. Are there any additional questions from the delegation? Hearing none, I believe there are no additional witnesses in opposition. Hearing none, that would conclude the bill hearing. I know time is running short, but I do believe we can hear the next two bills rather quickly. Is Delegate Haynes, First Vice Chair, available to preside over my hearing? If he's having some technical challenges, Second Vice Delegate Bridges, could you preside over my hearing for House Bill 1301?
I sure can, if you can hear me.
Yes, I hear you just fine.
Okay, so we will begin the hearing for House Bill 1301 with Chair Stephanie Smith.
Thank you so much, Delegate. I'm here today to present to you House Bill 1301. It's regarding an appropriation calculation that impacts Visit Baltimore. As is not characteristic, in the interest of time, I will defer to the administration to give further additional details.
Thank you. Natasha Mayu here on behalf of the Mayor's Office in support of House Bill 1301. So this bill would change the funding calculation for Visit Baltimore from a one-year projected receipts model to a 3-year actual rolling average. Visit Baltimore is the destination marketing organization for Baltimore City and helps bring tourists from across the world into the city. The way Visit Baltimore is funded, they receive a portion of the city's hotel tax. And under the current process, they receive an allocation of 1-year projected receipts of that hotel occupancy tax. Those receipts are later audited and any overages or shortfalls are either paid to Visit Baltimore or to the city. And that occurs 2 fiscal years after the collection. This funding model is reviewed every 5 years with the next review scheduled for 2022. As you can imagine, the pandemic has devastated the tourism industry, and as such, the funding for Visit Baltimore, and put those year-to-year calculations in severe flux. So we have worked with Visit Baltimore to try to find a way to smooth out their funding stream. We hope we never get hit with another pandemic, but you never know what's in store for the future. So the move to a 3-year actual receipt model would help ease those fluctuations and prevent unanticipated or historic events from drastically changing the funding from year to year. The bill will also extend funding the funding model for Visit Baltimore to 2027, so it does not need to be reviewed again next year. And we will have a technical amendment that would set the enactment of the formula change from 1 year projected receipts to the 3-year model to begin July 1st, 2023. While we understand Visit Baltimore is hurting now, so is the city. So with the change to that enactment date, it would just align with our budget and funding abilities as we all try to grapple with the pandemic. And with that, I would urge a favorable report on House Bill 1301. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Is there anyone else here to testify in support of House Bill 1301?
Hey, thank you, Delegate Bridges and Chairwoman Smith. Thank you. And I just first want to just start off to say a great thanks to the delegation for your continued support of Visit Baltimore, but your continued support of travel and tourism in Baltimore City. And then let me say, and Natasha has really articulated the bill extremely well, and I'm not going to repeat anything she said, but I do want to say this. Travel and tourism is too important to Baltimore City and to Maryland to not reinvigorate it. And so what this bill does for Visit Baltimore is to stabilize our funding. So travel and tourism is coming back in this country. Don't fool yourself on this one. In fact, it's starting to come back by the 3rd and 4th quarter of this year here in Baltimore City. So what this bill will allow us to do as the economy gets better, stabilize the funding at Visit Baltimore so we can do our job to bring jobs back to Baltimore City, to really help economic vitality in the city, and also to really make the industry of travel and tourism stronger than it's ever been before. So I encourage the support of the House Bill 1301 with the amendments, and I really appreciate the administration's and the finances team to really partner on this one. This is too important for the Baltimore City to take our eye off of reinvigorating travel and tourism to the city. So I say thank you to the delegation and appreciate your support on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Is there anyone else here to testify in support of the bill? Are there any questions for any members of, I think I see Delegate Haynes, you have your hand raised.
Good morning. I've had a little bit of a technical challenges, so on video because it don't look like my internet was supporting video microphone at the same time, but it looked like it's straightened out now. But anyway, Mr. Hutchinson, good always to see you out. You do a tremendous job with Visit Baltimore and tourism in the city. And in all transparency, you know, I'm serving on the board of Visit Baltimore, and I'm glad to be an advocate and supporter of Visit Baltimore and tourism in Baltimore City. Just to put it in perspective, because I don't think a lot of people really may understand the impact that tourism has on the city's economy. Can you quantify the tourism industry's impact prior to the pandemic in Baltimore City?
Thank you, Delegate Haynes. And absolutely, as all of us know, travel and tourism is arguably the 3rd largest economic driver here in Baltimore. So pre-pandemic, you're talking about a $6 billion industry. About $300 million comes to Baltimore City annually from this industry. Over almost 90,000 jobs pre-pandemic in this industry. And that's part of what we need to revitalize. A lot of that 90,000, those folks are out of work today. I would say out of the 90,000, about 60,000 of them live in Baltimore City. And so it's important for us to get those folks back to work. This is a big economic engine in the city. So it's revenue, that 300 million that I mentioned is very important to the city's economy. People come to visit Baltimore, they spend money in our restaurants, our museums, and our hotels, and they go home. And we don't have to educate their kids, pay their health insurance. This is one of the best investments any city can ask for. So it's a big economic generator, Delegate Haynes. And That's why we got to really reinvest in it, because we need this industry to be strong and sustainable in the future.
You're on mute if you were saying something, Delegate Haynes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hutchinson, Al. And I think that really, we're talking about an existing portion driver of our economy, without which we even have a longer road of recovery if we don't support, one of the second or third largest drivers of our city's economy. So thank you for those numbers. And thank you so much, Mr. Second Vice Chair, for letting me ask the question.
Thank you, Mr. First Vice Chair. Are there any more questions for any member of this panel? Seeing none, is there anyone here to testify in opposition to this bill? If not, that will end the hearing for House Bill 1301. Turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to move the bill.
Okay, we have one more bill hearing, and we have to be on the floor at 10. So I just wanted to honor that we're just going to get through all these hearings so that we can have a vote session on all these bills later. But I share your enthusiasm. Okay, Delegate Haynes.
No problem. I just know that we're pressed for time and trying to get bills out and through. So that's
no, I appreciate that. We're going to have a voting session very soon on all of these so we can move them right along. We just know we got to get to the floor pretty soon. Thank you so much. We will now quickly hear our last bill hearing for House Bill 68, Delegate Branch. Unless he's no, I believe this is Delegate Talmadge Branch.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is he still in the room? He may have been in another direction. We are getting kind of close to our conclusion time. What we can do is just move his bill hearing, because I can see that, people are probably making their moves to the floor for our 10 o'clock floor session. So I apologize that we can't hear this bill right now. This is the last one. I was hoping to push through. So at this time, are there any additional announcements? Okay, hearing none, I would like to request a motion to adjourn this meeting so that everyone can get where they need to be.
So moved.
Adjourn. Second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? This concludes our hearing. Go and be great. I'll see many of you on the floor shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Happy Friday.